This is Building Tomorrow, the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast.
On the show, you'll hear real conversations about what matters most to the people behind the scenes who are shaping Australian construction.
From lawyers and contract administrators to engineers, commercial managers, consultants, and all the other experts forging the future of Australian infrastructure today. I'm Mawuna Matanda.
I'm BJ Lamsal.
And I'm Jennifer Raphael. This episode is part of a special 3-part series exploring culture in the construction industry, including mental health, diversity, leadership, and the future of workforce sustainability across the sector. Today we're talking to Rita Zhang. Rita is an associate professor at RMIT, where she conducts industry-focused research to improve the health and safety performance in the construction industry. Today we are going to dive into some of her research projects, including projects aimed at improving communication between apprentices and superiors, research looking at women's experiences of humour and banter in construction, and managing safety in subcontracting arrangements. Rita also shares with us how the organisation Shine aims to improve industry collaboration on WH&S issues. Let's jump in. Rita, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Jennifer.
It's fantastic to have you on the show today. So, Rita, you're an associate professor at RMIT and you do a lot of research in the space of workplace health and safety in the construction industry. So I'd like to start today's discussion by asking you what led to you focusing on WH&S issues in your research?
Right. So before I moved to Melbourne, I got my PhD from the University of Hong Kong and also worked in the building construction industry in Hong Kong. And luckily, I was offered a job as a research fellow working at RMIT Center for Construction Health and Safety Research. So through my early engagement with construction health and safety research, I realized it's such an important and meaningful area. I mean, what I was doing would contribute to protecting construction workers' health and safety and even, saving lives. So that early work really led me to consider staying in this field. That's why I have been in this field for about 13 years by now. I'm still continuing research in construction health and safety area.
Starting your career in the Hong Kong construction industry, then coming over to Australia, have you noticed a lot of differences between the Australian marketplace versus Hong Kong?
So in terms of construction environment, I would say probably quite similar. Of course, in terms of an operational environment, in terms of, regulatory landscape, there will be some differences. But in terms of operational processes, I would say they're quite similar at both sides.
And so you mentioned you've worked in workplace health and safety for quite some time now. Have your perspectives on WH&S changed or evolved since you first started out?
By reflecting on my research over the past more than 1 decade, I did notice some changes in terms of research trend. For example, when I just started doing research in construction health and safety area, most of the projects I worked on was focusing on, safety aspect, construction safety. And gradually there was a shift toward psychosocial environment, toward mental health in construction. Yes, I did notice some change in terms of research trend.
So initially, a lot of focus on, for instance, preventing injuries, like physical injuries on site with the processes and procedures that are followed, whereas now the discussion has moved on to the issue of mental health and those sorts of injuries.
Oh, absolutely. And especially now we are focusing on managing psychosocial hazards in the workplace. So more and more research indicates there's a direct link between the psychosocial work environment and mental health outcomes.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll touch on that a little bit later in the discussion. But if I can turn now to some of the research projects that you've been involved in, one of them in particular was aimed at improving communication between apprentices and superiors on construction sites. Can you tell us a little bit more about this project?
Right. So that particular project was funded by iCare New South Wales. It was focusing on examining social support for construction apprentices. And existing research indicates the communication. When we talk about communication, we mean positive and supportive communication between supervisors and apprentices is really critical in terms of protecting apprentices' health and safety. Just imagine if an apprentice is dealing with, a supportive supervisor, they're more likely to ask questions, to raise safety concerns, or to discuss any issues they're experiencing. So these are positive outcomes. But in reality, not all communication is supportive, and then especially in a hierarchical, construction job site environment, the apprentices are often positioned at the bottom of the hierarchy. It does take them some courage to raise concerns, to ask questions. Supervisors' leadership skills, communication skills are really important in creating a supportive environment for construction apprentices. So we were motivated by the research evidence to do some research in this area. And we interviewed about 30 apprentices working in the New South Wales construction industry, as well as 11 supervisors. So through the interviews, we try to understand the nature of communication between apprentices and supervisors, and also to identify, key factors facilitating supportive and positive communication between them. And we identified both traits for apprentices as well as traits for supervisors to facilitate such good communication. Just give you an example. Imagine the situation when an apprentice facing some problems or there's some safety concerns. In order for the apprentice to speak up, they need to have the confidence and assertiveness. However, the supervisor should be approachable as well, should be willing to listen to apprentices' concerns, and should be willing to take action to resolve problems. So only when the traits from both apprentices and supervisors meet together, positive outcome can be produced. And later, based on the interview results, we actually developed an interactive training material in the format of a role-playing game to try to develop positive communication skills among both apprentices and supervisors, and the game was quite successful. We did a trial in the New South Wales construction industry. The results did show after receiving the training, construction apprentices, there were some behavioral changes observed primarily through facilitating their confidence in terms of communication into practices.
Yeah, because I can imagine for an apprentice, new to the industry, not sure what's going on, if issues do arise, it can be, as you say, quite difficult for them to properly communicate with their superiors about that. So that's really important. And so following on from that research and the role-playing training, is that being rolled out wider within the industry?
So actually, that material is currently publicly available on our research group's website. And some construction companies have noticed it, and they have adopted those training materials in their internal organizational training program. And following the success in developing that training material, we actually have used a similar approach to develop further games in training areas. For example, creating a respectful working environment, in terms of risk management. And currently, we are actually undertaking another research project to develop similar, training materials to improve, for example, the delivery process where vehicles and human, they interact with each other. And also to another aspect we're looking at is conflict resolving on the job site, how to improve interpersonal relationship, etc.
You've also done research in relation to gender issues on work sites as well. Can you tell us a little bit about that research?
Right. So that was a project our team undertook, I think last year, funded by Department of Education in New South Wales and in collaboration with Master Builders Association in New South Wales. So that project focused on women's experience of banter and humor in the construction industry. So we understand positive humor is great. Appropriate and positive humor can help to create a more enjoyable working environment, can help to, build cohesion within a team, can improve the work relationships. But our study shows a lot of women experience offensive, aggressive, unacceptable humor. In fact, these behaviors shouldn't be called humor anymore. They can be harassment, they can be sexism. So interesting enough, we did a survey within the whole New South Wales construction industry. So about 330 women participated in the survey, and the results showed about 65% of participants experienced some form of sexual harassment disguised by humor. Often people will say, oh, it's just a joke. Why are you so serious? But in fact, it's not a joke anymore. It's a kind of sexual harassment. So that research results are really, really interesting and provide a lot of implications in creating a respectful working environment for women.
And another area that you've done a lot of research in is on the approach of managing safety issues when it comes to subcontracting arrangements as well. What are some of the key safety issues that could arise in these types of arrangements?
Right. So often we will say subcontractors' health and safety, and we easily blame them. Oh, you see, the subbies, they're not complying, they haven't done well. But in fact, our research shows a lot of factors driving, subcontractors' health and safety outcomes. They're not at the subcontractor level. Instead, they are sitting at the higher level in the whole supply chain environment. So for that particular research, we actually used a system approach to look at the issue. So we adopted a theoretical model, which is called a constraint response model. What does that mean? If you look at the whole construction environment, the physical and business environment put constraints on construction clients. And then the construction clients respond to the constraints through project conception. So the response from the construction clients put further constraints to principal contractors who deliver and manage the project. And principal contractors will pass those constraints on to subcontractors. Just give you an example. We understand the construction industry is very competitive, and often the construction clients will use a competitive tendering process to select a contractor. So they set really tight timeline, tight budget. And then the principal contractor, of course, they want to win the job. They accept the conditions. Then they pass on the constraints to subcontractors. Now all the economic pressure goes to the subcontractors, and subcontractors have to meet the timeline, meet the budget requirement, have to coordinate between themselves. And that, in some cases, for subcontractors, they probably compromise health and safety in order to meet all the economic pressure, timeline, etc. So it does require a fundamental change in terms of the whole supply chain environment.
Yeah, so what you're finding is that there's a trickle down, I guess, of pressure from the top, and these tight economic constraints can lead to potentially cutting corners on workplace health and safety issues in order to meet these sort of tight margins, to deliver the project on time and not have all the consequences associated with delaying the project.
Absolutely.
And so what did you find were some effective strategies for managing safety in these kind of subcontracting arrangements?
So strategies have to be taken at different levels. So this is a subcontractor's poor health and safety outcomes. They are a systemic issue. They can't be resolved at one single level. Instead, again, we have to use a system approach to improve subcontractors' health and safety performance. So, of course, at the top level, at the client level, they really need to think about the impact of their decision makings on principal contractors, on subcontractors' health and safety outcomes, whether the budget is appropriate, whether the timeline allows subcontractors to work properly, whether the timeline actually puts people into danger. There have been quite a lot of initiatives which have been implemented both within Australia and overseas to improve subcontractor management and their health and safety outcomes. For example, through the literature review, we realize we often try to use penalty to penalize, poor health and safety research, but we don't tend to use rewards. So in one of the studies, actually they look at the rewarding scheme in terms of improving subcontractors' health and safety performance. Like if subcontractors perform well, okay, in the future, we may give you more jobs. We can develop long-term partnerships, or you will get additional bonus in a, tender evaluation process. So that's one of the examples. And then in terms of regulatory level and how to make sure the subcontractors understand their regulatory responsibilities, how to ensure subcontractors understand, how to actually implement all the regulatory requirements, meet all the requirements. That's another consideration. And subcontractors themselves, of course, they need to develop certain knowledge, capabilities in terms of managing health and safety hazards in a job environment. So, as I said, it's not a single level problem. It has to be resolved at multiple levels and also understanding the interactions at different levels.
Yeah, so it's, I guess, from what you're saying, taking more of a carrot rather than the stick approach to these issues and working really in partnership with one another at all levels throughout the contracting train in order to meet these safety obligations when people are working on site.
Absolutely. Collaboration, cooperation, and partnership.
And across all your research and the projects that you've been involved in, have there been any findings that have surprised you or challenged existing practices?
So I wouldn't say surprise or challenge, but sometimes health and safety can be improved by really minor changes. Just give you an example. Quite a few years ago, our team has been collaborating with a company in New Zealand to look at the safety climate on their construction projects. So we did periodic assessment of safety climate on all their funded construction projects because they were doing a lot of processing plants. So this company is a client organization. They have funded a lot of process plants projects. So for each of their projects, we did, regular assessment of the safety climate on their projects. And you could see the changes. For example, at the beginning of the project, often we see, the perception of safety climate is quite high. We got all the construction workers to fill in the survey to let us know what they think about, safety climate at different levels, at the client level, at the principal contractor level, at the supervisor level, etc. So as I said, often at the beginning, you will see, the scores were quite high. The safety climate was quite positive. But then when the project progressed to the middle stage, sometimes the scores will deteriorate, will go down, and due to a lot of, time pressure, production pressure, etc. So we coached this particular company, what you should do And then they realized sometimes it doesn't require radical changes or, big organizational changes. Instead, communicate the message properly. For example, from the supervisor to the construction worker, consistently communicate the message that safety shouldn't be compromised, even under time pressure. The same thing for principal contractors. Get the message right. Let the supervisors know. So later, through our reflection, we realize sometimes improved safety probably doesn't need radical changes. Instead, getting consistent message to make sure the message is appropriately conveyed to construction workers, that can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're finding is that there's a potential there for a correlation in a deterioration of workplace health and safety vigilance when it gets to a certain stage of the project and the time pressures are on, and that's really an opportunity for people to double down on their good health and safety practices and reiterate that message to everybody working on site that safety is important, even though we've got this particular challenge, this particular issue that we're dealing with. That doesn't mean we get to cut corners and put our health and safety at risk.
Absolutely.
Now, if I could turn to technology, what role do you think technology has in transforming our workplace health and safety practices on construction sites?
Right. So nowadays, when we talk about technology, probably a trendy thing to talk about is AI. Recently, we just commenced a new project looking at the controls for high energy risks in a construction project. And also, we want to examine whether AI can play a role in terms of ensuring the effectiveness of risk controls. So we understand in the construction environment is so complicated. There are so many things going on and there are so many changes. I think AI can play a critical role to help us, because AI, they don't have a limit in terms of cognitive processing ability. So AI can help us to detect what are the changes, what's new in the environment. So what should we do to control the new risk, etc. So I do believe AI has a critical role to play in terms of risk management in the future job site.
So there's a potential use case there for companies to use AI to potentially predict risky construction practices, to help to develop strategies to manage this risk on the sites. And as you say, it just helps to increase people's capacity to deal with this particular issue. So using your crystal ball, potentially think that there's going to be an increased use of technology such as AI in the future in the workplace health and safety space.
I believe so. And then apart from risk management, we have seen increasing application of technology, including AI and other types of technology in terms of training, data analysis to identify more effective strategies in health and safety management. So yeah, absolutely, I do agree in the future there will be increasing application of AI in this particular area.
Now, if we can turn to the issue of industry collaboration. So I imagine collaboration between all segments of the industry on workplace health and safety is key. And one organisation that does this is Shine. Can you explain what Shine is and its role within the industry?
The full name is a Safety and Health Research Network. So Shine has been led by our colleague, distinguished Professor Helen Lingard. So we try to bring, the industry leaders and us, academics, to work together and to conduct research with practical implications and practical impact. So The funding model for SHINE is a little bit different from the traditional funding model. So traditionally, in terms of doing research, we often try to write grant applications. And if the application is successful, we work with our project partners to deliver the project together. But for SHINE, we get our industry members together first, and each member will donate an amount of money and contribute the money to the repository we call SHINE Research Fund. And every year, as a research team, we try to collect information from our member organizations to understand, okay, what are the current challenges experienced by the construction industry? And then we pitch some projects, and our members will be voting in terms of which project will be prioritized to be undertaken in the next year. And once one project is selected, we then transfer some money from the SHINE Research Fund to the project, and then we deliver the project. And of course, the project is delivered in close collaboration with our SHINE members. So there are two ways in terms of collaboration. On one hand, we use practice from the industry to inform our project conception. We get all the information from our industry partners to understand what are their challenges. And after the research is completed, we then translate the research into practice. We implement the research outcomes to the industry. So the research outcomes will be shared across the entire construction industry. So there are two processes here. Use practice to inform research and then translate the research back to the industry through the collaboration with our SHINE members.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. So can you give us an example of some of the projects that SHINE is undertaking?
Right. So currently, SHINE is undertaking two projects, and one is called safety cluttering, means decluttering the health and safety management system in the construction industry. And the other one is the one I just mentioned, the risk control project for high energy risks in a dynamic construction environment. So the safety decluttering project is almost finished. We're in the final stage. So often we understand in terms of health and safety system, we tend to adding a lot of things into the systems. Whenever an incident has occurred, we're putting more checking points, we're putting more process, we're putting more documentations, but we never take things out. So the current health and safety system almost becomes bloated.
Very difficult to manage, yes.
Absolutely. A lot of safety activities consume a lot of resources. They take time. They cost money to be undertaken, but do they actually serve safety purpose? That's a question mark. So this project aims to, identify where the safety clutter is and what can we do to simplify things but maintain the effective control and to still ensure the safety is attended.
Yeah, that sounds like a really important project because, lots of discussion about trying to reduce red tape, trying to reduce the amount of regulatory burden that people in the industry are facing. So particularly, as you mentioned, workplace health and safety is a major area where this issue presents itself. So it'd be interesting to see those findings when the project concludes. So what advice would you give to construction companies looking to strengthen their workplace health and safety practices?
Evidence-based research. So whether something is effective or not, or what sort of strategies we need to adopt to resolve some of the health and safety issues we're facing, need evidence. So in terms of advice, I would encourage the construction organizations to have more collaboration with academics, research teams to generate more evidence of how we should tackle certain challenges and in what way. I think evidence-informed strategies are really critical in terms of resolving health and safety issues.
And so where can people looking to learn more about this, about your work, about any upcoming sort of initiatives, where can people go to access this information?
So all our previous research projects fundings are publicly available on our research website. So people just need to search construction health and safety research at RMIT and find all our previous projects. And we're happy to share the research findings to the whole industry through our website.
Well, Rita, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jennifer.
Thanks for listening to Building Tomorrow, the Society of Construction Law Australia podcast.
The Society of Construction Law Australia is a national organisation of members at all stages of their professional career, with a shared interest in construction law.
For more info about the Society of Construction Law Australia, head to their website, scl.org.au. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Sound Cartel.
To make sure you don't miss an episode of Building Tomorrow, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app.
And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Mawuna Matanda.
I'm Bijay Lamsal.
And I'm Jennifer Raphael. And we'll see you in the next episode of Building Tomorrow.